Hello, and welcome to the Balancing Act podcast with SingerLewak, where we teach you about the innovative solutions to help balance your business. Thank you for tuning in. We're glad you're here.
Today's podcast is about impactful technology changes, how to ensure that your staff will adopt and champion the results from your next ERP or CRM project. Hello, my name is Bob Green. I'm a CPA and a former CFO turned into a system strategist. I'm the partner at SingerLewak that founded our SL Business Informatics division. And for the last 15 years, we've provided objective systems strategic advisory to our clients in areas that range from cyber to IT assurance, ERP selection, and other sorts of digital transformation experiences. I'm leading several podcasts in our firm's podcast series. And today, I'm very appreciative to welcome a very talented member of our professional community and a very good friend, Dr. Jeremy Lurey, Ph.D. Morning, Jeremy.
Good morning. Great to be here, Bob. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we're happy to have you do this. And Jeremy's background, I'll give a brief bio. Jeremy is an expert at organizational change management, leadership development, and family business succession. He is also a skilled executive coach and serves as our resident change management advisor for SL Business Informatics. He helps our clients get through difficult digital transformation projects with an emphasis on who is impacted and what it means to their work environments. The objectives today are going to focus on broad themes, okay? But in general, it focuses on the reasons why adoption is among the top 3 factors for ERP and CRM project success, as well as why it's so difficult to achieve it. We're also going to touch on these points, some of the best practices to increase your likelihood of your team adopting these new systems, also why foresight and readiness is vital to the planning of those projects, and complexities specific to implementing technologies in certain types of businesses. With that said, Jeremy, let's get started. Let's get a better understanding of this word adoption. I've probably used it 3 times already, and I think it would be helpful to explain what adoption means. I know you've done slides, but this is not a slide deck. So let's explain how adoption relates to digital transformation projects and why is it so hard to achieve adoption?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. It's a really good place to start. As you know, most project management methodologies, and if we're talking, digital transformation, most systems development life cycles really focus on go live. When is conversion? When are we going to flip the switch on the new system?
That's for sure.
And I don't want to suggest that's not important, but it's not as important as adoption. That's really the critical piece, because we can hire great technologists to build a system. We can engage the smartest of our business professionals to lead these efforts. But what happens if no one actually uses the system or nobody embraces the changes once we implement? That's where companies really get their return on investment. And so adoption goes well beyond day 1 of conversion. It's week 1, month 1, year 1, and beyond of are people actually using the new system? Have they embraced these new business practices and these processes that we've designed throughout these efforts? And yes, it can be extremely difficult to reach adoption. I'm no different than anyone else. Change is hard on people. Change is confusing. It's frustrating. It's scary. And getting people to change their behaviors, especially when we're talking about new technologies like this, can be really challenging. Oftentimes, they're not involved in designing those new solutions. Some folks in our client organizations, have been there 10, 20, or 30 years. Maybe they even built the current systems that we're still using today. So,
and they're holding on tight.
Exactly, and don't want to let go. So learning a new system, embracing a new process, it can be really unsettling for folks. It requires giving up our past and letting go before we can move on and adopt that new beginning.
Great point. Great point. I know we've touched on also in our conversations in the past about the triangle of the holy grail of project management, the scope, the time, and the budget. And none of those seem to focus on that really important aspect that you just talked about, right? Which is people and adoption. Anything you want to share on that, or should we move on to the next question?
I would just echo that. It's a good call out. Most, CFOs who are signing off on projects like this and writing big checks, most CIOs who are looking at new technology, whatever the platform might be, they're really focusing on time, on scope, on budget. And from an organizational psychology, we look at adoption and what do people need to do differently moving forward. So you're right. It's sort of a fourth spectrum, a fourth dimension that we try to add to these projects beyond time, budget, and scope.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was fun. Okay, so as you know, Jeremy, we in our group, and you've been part of these, are big believers in a process that we call foresight. For those who aren't familiar with foresight, we do have a webpage on it, but in short, it's really a crisply executed readiness assessment of how an organization can or can't succeed with an upcoming ERP, CRM, or any difficult technology project. So having said that, obviously the impact is important and the adoption is even more important. Can you share the sorts of things, Jeremy, that an experienced change professional like yourself might be assessing when we're learning more about an organization and how we can determine, are they really ready to undertake such a difficult project?
Sure. Before you answer the question, though, just sort of reiterate how important foresight is. And one of the reasons I enjoy partnering with you and your team, if we were live on screen right now, you've seen the lighthouse behind my desk. Folks listening clearly can't, but I'm a firm believer in planning our future from the future. And if we don't know where we're going, we're not likely to get there. And so, this foresight methodology, or what I'm going to talk about within a readiness assessment, that discovery phase, is key to determining what success looks like. If we don't figure that part out, how are we going to define success and know if we've achieved our goals? If we don't know where we're going, as I said, how we ever get there. So during this readiness phase, from our perspective, again, we're managing the people side of these transformation efforts. You alluded to this earlier. We're looking at who is impacted by these changes and how are they impacted, because we then try to design change strategies. So we're reviewing this company's history and culture for change. Has change been embraced in the past, or has it been resisted? We're looking at best practices, not just from an industry perspective, not just based on literature, but literally within this organization. How have they been successful before? Was it the CEO doing short videos that go out on a portal? Was it doing all hands meetings, every month in a lunchroom? We work with companies large and small, and so different tactics will be appropriate, but we really want to know what works best in this company. And we're also considering what other priority initiatives are underway right now, or what major business cycles might come up. I work with a lot of clients in the agriculture and food sectors. So there's a lot of seasonality, right? We're not going to launch this in the middle of a summer harvest, for example, or I work with a global technology firm. If they have a product launch happening, we probably want to be mindful of that before we embark on these projects. So readiness is looking at all of those factors, in addition to really looking at the people. Do we have the right people in place? If we're implementing a new CRM package, for example, we may need to hire a chief revenue officer. We may need to have a different head of sales, because that VP of sales we have today could be more of that lone ranger who's out trying to hit their own sales target. And no offense to people like that listening, but that may not be the right person to engage the entire sales force and get everybody acting like team members, collaborating rather than individual, hunters going out to get their own sales targets.
So true.
Do we have people who are engaged, right, or even excited about these change processes? So we're doing interviews with key leadership. We're doing feedback sessions with large groups. We want to know if they're excited about the direction we're heading in or not, because if there are any early indicators for risk, or if we see barriers to change, we need to identify those right away while we can still develop change strategies to address them. I mean, I've learned resistance is not a bad thing. You just need to be mindful that it's there and then start to create some strategies to address it.
And work around it. I know that we're kind of jumping to future questions, but that's exactly right. Our challenge that we see too, and again, you and I have done this together, where we're looking at, in these interviews, we're listening to the people, and we understand kind of what they're talking about, their desires for their system changes, and their interest in how much or how little they want to be doing for that project. But I think we're also looking just in general, have they experienced anything like this before? And not just technologically. So it's one thing to say, yeah, I've been through a large implementation of software X, Y, and Z. I'm a pro. I get it. They'll tell us. And we got other people who say, I've never done this before, and I've been using the same system for 30 years. That's functional comfort with software. And there's another one that just says, if you've been through change experiences before, and I to your point, what's people's experience? So anything to add on that? I just think that's always one of those things where we have to look at the individual and say, look, I know you may be here and you want to help, but have you done this before? And how comfortable are you with what we're doing on a subject matter level?
Yeah, I'll add one thing to this, Bob, which is there's great literature around resistance to change. And, using the simple 80-20 rule, 80% of our strategies to address resistance tend to get to 20% of the resistance, right? Most of the resistance actually happens below the surface level, but we prepare one more spreadsheet and put the business case out there. We put together one more slide deck and hold a town hall meeting. We send one more email from the CEO or the CIO explaining what's going on. And we assume by sharing more information, people will get really excited and get on board. But when the resistance is below the surface line, it's not, I don't get it. It's not, I don't understand, give me more information. It's, I don't like it. Or I don't trust you, project leader. And so some of those questions you were alluding to are great. Maybe I've been with this organization for only 18 months. Well, wow, what brought you here? Someone implemented an ERP package at my old company and I got fired. Well, don't we want to know that now? Yeah. Right? Because we don't want this person to assume that they should be looking for a new job on Indeed at the beginning of a project. We want to get them enrolled. And so all of those more qualitative behavioral questions, really learning the people side of what's going on inside people's minds is really important at this early phase of readiness and really building into the foresight process.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we could go on for days on that alone. So we're going to dive a little deeper. It doesn't, for the listeners, it doesn't mean we're going on for another hour. We're trying to keep this concise, but I want to go a little further on some ideas here. So Jeremy, maybe you could share some of the most effective strategies. You alluded to some earlier, but what can companies do to kind of get team members a little bit more interested in adopting the systems that they're implementing? I know that's broad, but maybe highlight a few things.
Sure. Think about the number of projects you've heard of. I know you come in and you do rescue work regularly when projects have gone awry. Think of those projects where nobody was involved from a broad user base. You had just a couple of key people who were designing the solution, who said our implementation date is April 1st, and then they just assume we're going to flip a switch. So one of the key strategies for success, because that is not effective, is to get people involved early, right? We want widespread representative participation right from the start in that design. And I'm not saying we need to take all 93 people out of their accounting function, put them on a project, but can we have at least a couple involved in operations and, sales, marketing, and so on? So we don't just wait for adoption to happen at the end when we go live. We really get people involved early because we want them to play with the system. We want them to talk about their needs. We may not address all of their wants, but we sure want to get at least all of those needs identified early on.
Yep.
As they're part of this process, communications is key, obviously. I've heard people say communication is the lifeblood of projects like this, or it's the glue that keeps things moving forward together. We have a lot of clients who don't want to communicate because they don't know all the answers just yet. Well, I have a huge bias towards communicate early, communicate often, communicate what you know when you know it, right? This isn't about waiting until the last minute go live announcement when we know problems are going to come up. It's about getting people involved early so that we, identify some of those problems and can address them hopefully in the design. But this really takes having change communication champions embedded throughout our organization. And, it could be a small company in one location, so we're talking across departments. Could be, a regional or a national company, so we're talking across different business locations. And as these local sort of champions are communicating out to their teams, we want them to have consistency, right? What are the key themes that really deliver the point of this project? What is our value add? And that means selling the problem more so than just the solution. Like, why are we doing this? I might be an AP clerk and I'm perfectly happy with my 19 different, key codes I need to use and the way that I click through the system. The fact that you're telling me I'm going to have only 16 key codes and that's supposed to be better for me, I don't have a problem today, right? So we need to really, sell the problem before we start selling a solution. And typically that means getting our senior leaders on board, right? When we talk about stakeholder management, there's nothing worse than having a senior executive who turns a cold shoulder to a project like this, or even worse, becomes sort of that soft and subtle saboteur who is sort of speaking poorly outside of those project meetings, outside of the steering committee meetings, so that their people don't embrace it. So this is about education and leadership development. Obviously, we could talk about user training and giving people the training they need to use the new system. We want them to be able to perform their jobs. But even before we get to that functional job skills training, let's talk about leadership development and how do we get our executive sponsors on board as ambassadors and to champion the project. I've had too many projects where everyone says, from the CEO memo to the CIO town hall, whatever, this project is priority number one. And you know that it's number 3 or 4 or 5 at best. And so really starting with leaders and then driving the communication throughout the organization before we even get into training and sort of those pre-go live, deployment activities.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was great, and I appreciate that. Could have been hours. I'm going to recap because I think from an impact perspective of this podcast, since this isn't video and we can't show lists, I took some manually here. One was just widespread involvement. Couldn't agree more. And in fact, I think to free people up, we've seen, and I know again we've done this together. We've seen people backfill in departments where you know that the involvement is vital, but yet there's not enough people to do the day-to-day sometimes. So backfill can help. You shared more also about communication being key and that also change champions need to be embedded. You shared that consistent themes need to be shared to deliver the point of the project, the value add, and why we're doing this. Also, selling the problem before selling the solution. That was genius, and I appreciate that phrase you used. And I would just add to that the concept of drivers and, essentially the why the project's being done, and let's get everybody on the same page on at least that before we go a whole lot further. So much of the time, the scope is not clear at all about people, about a project like this, and people are confused, like, why are we doing this, and what benefit is there to the company? So thank you for that. The others are all
one more piece that comes up, Bob, just as you're walking through and talking about that, some of our clients are going through so many changes. They're in hyper growth mode because of some market factors, or maybe there's a merger acquisition that happened. So that's what's driving the digital transformation and the adoption of new systems. So you think about all of these different changes. One of the things that can be most valuable is, can we put them all under one banner? Can there be one mega change? Can we have one name for all this? So for example, I was working with a client several years ago. They had 51 legacy systems in place across multiple functions, and we happened to be implementing an ERP for them that was going to collapse them all into one single platform. And so we called it Project Fusion. And we developed a logo and a brand identity where that I in Fusion actually looked like a person. So that individual user and, the I, the dot of that I was like an eyeball in a person's head. And, we used all this imagery with some great marketing and communications folks so that we all within that client system across the organization knew Project Fusion, that's the priority. It's a lot of different changes, but it's really one big change, because that's where we see change fatigue. That's where we see these projects sort of die out, where it's one change after another, and sort of the initiative of the month. So if we can build that 18, 24, 36-month roadmap, if we can kind of pull these all into one narrative rather than these disjointed efforts, I think that helps people stay engaged throughout.
Yep, very good. Again, thank you. This is one of those topics that we could spend so much time on. Let's hit our last question. This kind of a rounding it out here. So we both worked with a lot of different kinds of companies, and I know in your past, I know you worked at one of the big four for quite a while, dealing with change on a huge level at Fortune 500 companies around ERP. But the range of experience for you also goes into investor-backed and nonprofits, which have their own share of challenges, which I think we all know can be even more difficult. Each of these has their own complexities in adopting new systems, right? So, you've been involved with, and I'm kind of picking on some of your experiences that I know are real and probably very, very current, which is you're working with a number of multi-generational family businesses. And I know that isn't Fortune 500 typically, but they are great examples of how many, many types of common challenges to successful implementations, they can live there in those kinds of businesses more than others. They seem to be able to check the boxes of the entire menu of what can go wrong. Can you share a little bit about some strategies that people can take to enhance their likelihood of success in companies like that, or those that are somewhat tangential because they all have similar types of problems?
Sure. And thanks for asking this question.
Sure.
Family business has become a passion of mine over the last several years, and especially if we're talking about a multi-generation, legacy family business. I will, reinforce what you just said, though. Not-for-profit agencies have their own complications. Government organizations have some challenges going into projects like this. But if I can focus on family, because those are so complex, so emotionally charged, and oftentimes really lack the more sophisticated advanced technologies because they've been led by a leading generation that's not as tech savvy. They're not tech focused in their work. It's their next gens, their children, nieces, nephews, whomever, within the family system or working the business. They're the ones who tend to be more tech forward and drive these change initiatives. And it's often because that business is changing. What we did 25 or 30 years ago is not the way the market is today, and definitely not where it will be in the next 25 to 30 years. So we need to get off of our dated legacy platforms onto more advanced enterprise systems. We need to embrace things like CRM rather than just trust a few good salespeople to go out and pour their sweat equity into their relationships and drive this work. And so it can be really challenging within a family business environment. We need to get people engaged early. We need to define what success is early. We need to make sure we have buy-in from the ownership and the shareholders, not just that next gen 32-year-old director of IT who's seeing an opportunity, but for the entire family leadership to get on board. And oftentimes projects like this really necessitate displacing some of those embedded leaders, while we elevate others who maybe haven't even demonstrated their skills or abilities yet because they haven't had the opportunity. And so it requires a lot of trust, requires a shift in vision and recognizing when new market opportunities are there or when market pressures might be there to require us to move in a different direction. But ultimately, within a family business that has generations of legacy behind it, it means focusing on the future and where we're going, as I alluded to the lighthouse earlier in your foresight methodology. It's not about holding on to the past of what got us here. That is not going to carry us forward into the next generation.
So true. So true. And again, it applies to so many, but I think one word you used earlier about the emotion, they do run higher there, and it's just by nature. We've seen situations where people are trying to bring in outside leadership and kind of that next level of executive, or not the next level, but the next generation or kind of a new perspective leader. That's really hard. And some of those people, in circumstances, even most recently, we've had one where we've said, whoever you bring in at that level that's going to be involved with this large transformation, into this one in particular is an ERP situation. They need to be both operationally savvy to deal with the things that you need here in this business anyway, but they need to have that organizational kind of change champion mentality as well, and try and effectuate change, right? And I know that's hard. How often do you see people like that come in and succeed relative to fail, though? That's always my concern.
Well, let's look at the statistics. And no offense to anyone listening to us who is tied to a system. I'm system agnostic. So I don't care what the name of the company is or the platform. It's the fact that we're putting organizations through these very complicated transformation efforts. If you can't attend to the people, and especially in a family business environment, if we're talking about that, if you don't understand the underlying dynamics and the history, that's why the readiness work was so important, to understand the history of change. You're far less likely to be successful. We talk about 70, 80% of these projects tend to fail. Now, fail could just mean not on time. Fail could mean our initial scope is not on target. We need to push back some of the functionality. Fail could be it costs you another $1 million, right? It's not on budget. So fail is a word we need to qualify. But at least I would say these projects are not optimal and not smooth and successful. They struggle in many different ways when we don't attend to the people side of the technology change. We really just focus on the code and the system itself.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And I think I'm impressed, actually. I'm checking the time, and we've done it in just at the right amount of time today. Jeremy, thank you for sharing. Any parting comments, though, before we go?
I would say the one thing, especially the last few years, has brought to me is just be kind to yourself. Everyone out there who's leading a project like this, listen more than you speak. Just be mindful of other people's situations, whether it's family life at home or it's that critical, business priority that's going to show up in the middle of your project. But, be kind to each other and be compassionate for us. It is an arduous, very challenging process to get through. That's why many of these projects do fail in one way or another. So best of luck. And again, sort of be kind to yourself and to others going through this.
Jeremy, thank you very much. I've enjoyed, as always, our conversations. Enjoy working with you on the projects we do together with our teams, and you're just an invaluable resource. And we really appreciate the time you took this morning to record. I'll also mention to the listeners, I know it's difficult to do without a screen. So if you're looking for a way to get in touch with Jeremy or myself, you can find us through the firm's website at SingerLewak.com. Under partners, you'll find me, and then of course under our pages, you'll find Jeremy as well. So thank you again, and everybody have a good day and good luck with your systems projects. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Balancing Act by SingerLewak. We hope you enjoyed the segment and gained some insight on how to keep your business balanced. You can tune in every Thursday morning to gain a sense of balance in this fast-paced business industry. You can listen on SingerLewak.com, YouTube, or anywhere podcasts are available. We'll see you next time.